My dear friends, this week's Torah and Haftorah portion in Leviticus and in 2 Samuel are linked by sudden deaths. In Leviticus, Aaron's sons Nadav and Avihu tragically die while conducting services with fire. And in 2 Samuel, as King David is bringing the ark to Jerusalem, establishing Jerusalem as his religious and political capital, it's an easy date to remember, 1000 BCE, we are told about a wild celebration, complete with music and dancing. And in the midst of all the festivities, as in Leviticus, something terrible happens. One of the oxen pulling the cart with the ark in it stumbles. It looks as if the ark is going to fall. If you've ever seen someone almost drop a Torah scroll, then you know how scary that could be. A well-meaning man, Uzzah, in 2 Samuel, he reaches out to steady the ark to keep it from falling, and he's struck down, like dies. Like the story in this week's Torah portion, we are hard-pressed to understand the tragedy. Eventually, we learn, as I have, that when a loved one dies, especially for no understandable reason, what people need is not explanation, but consolation. There are no satisfying explanations or words. And while nobody really knows what happened to our souls, or nobody knows where we all go from here when we pass through this world, the very notion of the afterlife, which Judaism gave the world, even without being specific, the idea of the afterlife is consoling. A few weeks ago, a friend sent me a stunningly original, thought-provoking book on this theme of imagining the afterlife. It's a book several of you may have read, but which escaped my attention when it was published 10 years ago. The book is entitled Sum, S-U-M, by best-selling author and brilliant Stanford neuroscientist David Eagleman. Sum is simply 40 short chapters, essays, different variations on this theme tonight of the afterlife. God, what happens after we die? I want to share with you the first essay abridged of the 40 to give you a sense of Sum. In the afterlife, you relive all your experiences, but this time with the events reshuffled into a new order. This time, all the moments that share a quality are grouped together. So you spend 2 months in a row driving the street in front of your house, 7 months having sex, you sleep for 30 years without opening your eyes. For 5 months straight, you flip through magazines while sitting in the bathroom. You also take all of your pain at once, all 27 intense hours of it. Bones break, cars crash, skin is cut, babies are born. Once you make it through, it's agony-free for the rest of your afterlife. But that doesn't mean it's always pleasant. You spend 6 days clipping your nails, 15 months looking for lost items, 18 months waiting in line, 2 years of boredom sitting in an airport terminal, 1 year reading books. Your eyes hurt and you itch because you can't take a shower until it's your time to take your marathon 200-day shower. You spend 2 weeks wondering what happens when you die. 77 hours of confusion, 1 hour realizing you've forgotten somebody's name, 3 weeks realizing you are wrong, 2 days lying, 6 weeks waiting for a green light, 3 months doing laundry, 15 hours writing your signature, 51 days deciding what to wear, 9 days pretending you know what is being talked about, 18 days staring into the refrigerator, 6 months watching commercials, 5 days working buttons and zippers, 4 minutes wondering what your life would be like if you could reshuffle the order of events. In this part of the afterlife, you imagine something analogous to this earthly life. And the thought is blissful. A life where episodes are split into tiny, digestible pieces, where moments, even the painful ones, do not endure seemingly forever, where one can experience the joy of jumping from one event to the next, like a child hopping from spot to spot on the burning sand. That's one chapter. I won't read the next chapter. Just one more of the 40. I will abridge. Addresses a question many of you may have wondered. What will we look like physically when our souls live on with God? This essay begins, God resolved at the outset that he wanted every human being to participate in the afterlife. But the plans weren't thought out well. And immediately, God began to run up against some confusion about age. How old should each person be in the afterlife? Should this grandmother exist here at her age of death? Or should she be allowed to live as a young woman, recognizable to her first lover, but not to her granddaughter? God decided it was unfair to keep people the age they were at the end of their lives, when much of their alacrity and beauty had been worn down. Allowing everyone, though, to live as a young adult proved a bad solution, because the afterlife quickly degenerated into unbounded sexual pursuits. And at Middle Ages, they talked only about their children and mortgages, making conversations in the afterlife tedious. So God finally landed on an ingenious solution while watching light diffract through a prism. So when you arrive in the afterlife, you are split into multiple selves at all possible ages. The you that existed as a single identity is now all ages at once. These pieces of you no longer get older, but remain ageless into perpetuity. The yous have transcended time. And this takes some getting used to. The different beams of you might run into each other at the grocery store, like separate people do in earth life. Your 76-year-old self may revisit his favorite creek and run into your 11-year-old self. Your 28-year-old self may break up with a lover in a diner and notice your 35-year-old self visiting that spot, lingering on the air of regret, hanging over the empty seat. Typically, the different yous are happy to see each other because they possess the same name and a shared history. But the yous are more critical of yourselves than they are of others. And so each you quickly identifies habits that get under your skin. It's a fact of afterlife. Don't be surprised to discover that after decomposition into your different ages, the different yous tend to drift apart. You discover that the you of 8 years old has less in common than expected with the you of 32 and the you of 64. The 18-year-old you finds more in common with other 18-year-olds than with your 73-year-old you. The 73-year-old you doesn't mind a bit seeking out meaningful conversations with others of the same generation, Beyond the name, the yous have little else in common, but don't lose hope. The shared resume of your life, parents, birthplace, hometown, school years, first kiss, has a magnetic, nostalgic pull. So once in a while, the different yous organize a gathering like a family reunion, bringing together all your age into a single room. At these reunions, the middle-aged will delightfully pinch the cheeks of the young, and the teenagers will politely listen to the stories and advice of the elderly. I won't read more. It's a book. But the big idea in this little book, in the next chapter of the afterlife, is to worry less about the afterlife, or to try and solve the tragedies in this week's Torah portion. When Aaron's 2 sons are struck down, the rabbis try to come up with answers. They're none satisfying. Same with Uzzah, struck down trying to save the ark in 2 Samuel. Rather than try to solve the tragedies in this week's Torah that no compassionate, loving God would ever, ever intentionally inflict. While any of these 40 chapters, essays, are possible regarding what happens wherever we go from here when we die, perhaps reminiscing about the best moments and days in this lifetime is the point of it all. However long or short our days are, perhaps the message of life itself, whether looking back or looking ahead, is to treasure the moments and the people in our lives, not only because life is fragile, but even more because every moment is so precious, including right now and every Shabbat we celebrate together. Amen.